The Mask of Silent Faces. It was never meant to be mine. I found it in a place that had no business still standing, a theater gutted and forgotten, its bones sagging under years of decay. The facade was fractured brick and plaster, windows blind with grime, doors chained but sagging loose on their hinges. The once grand marquee had collapsed, letters scattered into the street like teeth knocked from a mouth. When I stepped inside, the air was thick, wet with the smell of mildew and rotting velvet. It clung to me, dampening my breath, soaking into my clothes. The silence was unnatural, so deep it swallowed the shuffle of my steps. Dust hung in beams of light that cut through holes in the roof, drifting like ash in a cathedral of ruin. Red curtains sagged, their fabric eaten through with moths, edges curling black with damp rot. Rows of seats sat crooked, their stuffing spilling out like wounds. It was on the stage that I saw it. A mask, lying upright against a broken chair, angled just so that its blank eyes stared directly into mine. It was white porcelain, though not pure, cracked faintly, a hairline fracture running down one cheek like a tear. The lips were painted closed, neither smiling nor frowning, just pressed into an eternal hush. Around the edges, faint streaks of gold paint traced patterns I could not name. They reminded me of veins, pulsing faintly in the dim light. I should have left it there, yet I felt drawn. Something in its stillness compelled me, as though it were waiting. When I lifted it, the porcelain felt colder than stone, heavier than its size should allow. The surface was smooth, too smooth, almost moist with the chill of a freshly unearthed grave. The theater seemed to grow quieter as I held it. I carried it home. From the moment it crossed my threshold, the atmosphere of the house changed. Rooms that once felt safe became hollow, voids that seemed to lean inward. Corners seemed darker, shadows thicker. The mask sat on my desk at first, propped against a book. Its empty eyes followed me no matter where I stood. At night, I began to hear them. Whispers. Soft, indistinct murmurs, like voices behind a closed door. They carried no words, only the texture of language, breath-shaping syllables that dissolved before forming. The sound seemed to seep from the mask itself, the hollow of its mouth radiating with phantom air. When I pressed my ear close, the whispers ceased, replaced by silence so complete it roared in my skull. The scent came next. Perfume, faint at first, then overwhelming. Old perfume, the kind worn by strangers in faded photographs. Sweet, powdery, rotting at the edges like flowers wilted long before they reached bloom. The smell followed me through the house, settling on my sheets, in my clothes, in my hair. The dreams arrived after. I dreamed of faces. Endless faces suspended in darkness, each wearing a mask identical to mine. They drifted toward me, their eyes wide, lips sealed. Behind the masks, I sensed mouths moving. They tried to speak, but the porcelain muted them, the words rattling in their throats like insects trapped in glass jars. When I woke, the mask on my desk was angled differently, tilted slightly closer. It escalated slowly, like water rising. I began to see reflections that weren't mine. In the bathroom mirror, my face seemed blurred, features softened into something unfinished. Sometimes I saw faint cracks tracing my skin, veins of porcelain beneath the surface. Once I touched my cheek and swore it felt smooth, not like flesh, but glazed ceramic. I caught glimpses in windows, shadows standing beside me, heads tilted, masks staring. They never moved directly, only shifted when I blinked. I tried to put the mask away, to bury it in the closet beneath old blankets. But that night, I awoke to find it resting on my chest, its cold weight pinning me down. The hollow eyes stared into mine, the painted lips pressed close enough to taste the faint dust of porcelain. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. My body was locked, heart hammering uselessly against the crushing weight. Just when I thought I would suffocate, the mask slid off, falling to the floor with no sound. But the whispers grew louder. I began to understand them. They were not words, not exactly, but emotions distilled into tone. Hunger, envy, desperation. Hundreds of voices tangled together, layered so deeply I could not tell one from another. Each one wanted to be heard, to be freed, to take. And the mask was their vessel. I avoided sleep, yet exhaustion forced me. When I dreamed, I was not myself. I was wearing the mask. Through its hollow eyes, I saw countless others masked as well, their heads turning in unison to look at me. In those moments, I realized I was not dreaming. I was standing among them, bound in their congregation of silence. They did not move. They only stared, until one of them stepped forward. Their mask was cracked wide, fissures running across it like veins of fire. Behind the broken porcelain, I saw flesh, skin peeling, lips shredded, eyes wide with eternal scream, but no sound emerged. The silence was absolute, a silence that consumed, suffocating, crushing. I woke screaming, but no sound left my throat. For hours, I could not speak. My mouth moved, but nothing emerged. My voice had been swallowed by the mask. The silence spread. Objects in the house began to make no sound. Drawers opened without creaking, doors shut without a slam. The floorboards did not groan under my steps. Even the wind outside seemed muffled, the world thick with cotton and shadow. Only the whispers remained. One night, I found myself standing before the mask without memory of walking there. My hand rose against my will. The mask fit perfectly against my face, as though it had been made for me. The porcelain clung cold to my skin, the edges sealing seamlessly along my jaw. And in that instant, I heard them all. Thousands of voices, howling, weeping, begging, laughing, shrieking. They were not trapped behind the mask. They were the mask, each soul bound into its glaze, each face painted upon its surface. Their silence was not lack of sound, but the theft of it, stolen from every mouth pressed behind porcelain. When I tore the mask away, my lips were bleeding. My skin beneath felt different, not soft, but brittle. Now, I keep it locked away, but it doesn't matter. I feel it even when I cannot see it. Its silence lingers in my lungs, a weight that grows heavier each night. Sometimes, in the reflection of a dark window, I see it already upon me, even when my hands are empty. And I know that one night soon, I will not resist. The mask will claim my face as its own. My silence will join the rest. and someone someday will find me waiting. The weeping glass. It began with the sound. At first, I thought it was nothing more than a trick of the pipes in my grandmother's old house, or the wind working its way through warped window frames. But the longer I stayed, the clearer it became, soft droplets, a delicate tap tap tap, as though water was falling against glass. It came at night, mostly, when the house settled into silence and every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo. The house itself was already unsettling. It had been abandoned for years, left to rot after my grandmother's death, and yet something in me had pulled me back to it. The air smelled of wood gone sour with damp, the faint tang of rust, and a sweetness underneath that reminded me of flowers long dead. The wallpaper sagged, peeling down in strips that revealed plaster discolored by leaks. Dust floated everywhere, suspended in the light that spilled through fractured shutters. The glass sat in the upstairs hallway. A mirror, taller than me, framed in carved oak. Its surface was not smooth like modern glass, but faintly warped, as though it had seen too much heat or time. When the moonlight struck it, it seemed to ripple faintly, like water held upright. I remembered it vaguely from my childhood, though I had never dared stand too close. My grandmother used to cover it with a heavy cloth, as though it were something to be hidden rather than displayed. Now it stood bare, exposed, reflecting me in ways that felt wrong. The first night, I heard the dripping. I searched the house, checked the bathroom, the kitchen sink, the ceiling for leaks. Nothing. Yet when I stood near the mirror, the sound grew sharper, as though droplets were striking from inside the glass itself. I leaned close. My reflection stared back, pale and hollow-eyed in the dim light. The sound of dripping became heavier, like rain falling on glass. But the surface was dry, smooth under my fingertips. Cold. The second night, I woke to the sound again. It wasn't dripping anymore, it was weeping. A faint, rhythmic sobbing, muffled and distant, but clear enough to raise the hairs on my arms. It echoed through the hall, pulling me toward the mirror. The closer I stood, the stronger it became. My reflection didn't move the way I did. It lagged, slightly delayed, as though I were watching someone trying to mimic me through a pane of water. When I tilted my head, its motion came a heartbeat after mine. When I raised my hand, its fingers trembled in ways mine did not. And its eyes, they were too wet, glossy, filled with liquid that shimmered and rolled down pale cheeks. The weeping wasn't in the house. It was in the glass. I backed away, but the sound followed me, soft at first, then sharp, until I could hear nothing else. It filled the walls, the floor, the air, saturating the house like damp. By the third night, I stopped sleeping. I sat awake with the lights on, listening. Every so often, the sobbing gave way to something else, the sound of nails dragging faintly down glass, screeching, clawing. My reflection grew more restless, its lips quivering like it wanted to scream but couldn't. When I finally did drift into sleep, I dreamed of water. Endless dark water, a surface stretched tight over an abyss. Beneath it, faces floated, distorted, pressed against the underside like flies trapped in amber. Their mouths opened and closed, streams of bubbles rising from their lips, but the water swallowed their cries. I could see their hands reaching upward, slamming against the barrier, palms flattening, fingers bending at wrong angles. Each strike rippled the surface like glass flexing against a storm. And when I woke, my pillow was damp. The glass was weeping onto me. I tried covering the mirror the way my grandmother had, dragging a sheet over it, but the cloth grew wet. Dark patches spread like stains, seeping through, dripping onto the floorboards. The sobbing only grew louder, furious, 1,000 muffled voices pressing against the barrier. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again. Instead, I sat across the hall watching. By then, my reflection had changed. Its face was swollen, distorted with grief, lips trembling, cheeks streaked with water that never stopped flowing. Its body sagged, shoulders hunched as though carrying a weight too great to stand upright. And when I turned away just for a second, I swore I saw others behind it. Shapes crowded in the depths of the glass, faceless at first, then clearer. Men, women, children, all pressed against the barrier, their hands splayed across the inside, mouths open in eternal sobs. The house began to smell of damp earth, stagnant and heavy. Every surface I touched seemed wet, even when it appeared dry. My own skin felt clammy, like I had been sitting in fog that no one else could see. On the 5th night, the glass cracked. It was faint at first, a hairline fracture running diagonally across the surface, catching the light like a vein of lightning. The weeping grew sharper, more frantic, the sobs layered into shrieks, the screech of nails louder and closer. My reflection no longer mimicked me. It pressed its palms flat against the glass, its mouth opening wide, wider than human lips should stretch. From its eyes poured streams of water, endless, flooding down its chin. I stepped back, but the water didn't stop at the surface. It spilled outward, dripping onto the floorboards, spreading in dark rivulets across the hall. I heard splashes, faint but real, as though something unseen walked through shallow pools. The house groaned, every wall damp, the air saturated. My breath came cold, each exhale clouding like mist. The cries in the glass became screams, a choir of agony, rising in pitch until it was all I could hear. When I closed my eyes, I saw them. Not in a dream this time, but as though the barrier between waking and nightmare had broken. Faces pressed against me from all sides, distorted through water, their mouths moving soundlessly. Their eyes were the worst, glassy, bulging, filled with grief so deep it seemed to seep into my marrow. I tried to run, but every door led back to the hall. Every corner folded inward, bringing me again before the mirror. And then it happened. The glass shattered. Not outward, not into the house, but inward, splintering like ice, fragments collapsing into darkness. Through the fracture, I saw the faces more clearly, not reflections, but people. Trapped, pressing, writhing, reaching. The weeping became deafening, no longer muffled, spilling into the world like a flood of anguish. Hands reached out from the broken surface, pale, wet, cold. Fingers caught my wrists, my arms, my throat. They pulled, dragged, their strength immense, unstoppable. The water poured over me, into me, filling my lungs until I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, my chest burned, the sobbing drowning every thought. And as the darkness swallowed me, I saw my own reflection on the other side. Pressed behind the glass, mouth open in a silent scream, eyes overflowing with endless tears. I never left the mirror. The glass still stands in that hall, its surface faintly rippling. If you ever pass by, you may hear it, the soft dripping, the weeping, the faint press of palms from within. Look closely, and you might see a face staring back, familiar but wrong, lips quivering against silence. It will be mine, until the next takes my place. The Collector's Doll. I always thought dolls were lifeless things, plastic faces, painted eyes, stiff smiles meant to comfort children but unsettling to adults. They belonged to the dust of forgotten attics, their gazes fixed on nothing, their silence eternal. That was before I found the Collector's Doll. The house where I discovered it should never have been entered. It stood at the end of a road long abandoned, its wooden frame leaning as though ready to collapse into the earth. The roof sagged, shingles missing like rotting teeth. Windows were clouded with grime, faintly reflecting the sky like cataracts. Ivy had claimed half the structure, choking it in green veins that pulsed in the wind. Even from outside, the air smelled of mildew, iron, and something faintly sweet, like flowers left too long in water. Inside, the silence was heavier than I expected. It wasn't the silence of an empty home, but the kind that pressed against your ears, suffocating, making each breath sound too loud. The floor groaned under my weight, boards soft with rot. Wallpaper peeled in curling strips, revealing walls bruised by damp. Dust hung in the shafts of light like a living thing, shifting when I passed through. And then there were the dolls. Everywhere. Lining shelves, filling cabinets, staring from shadowed corners. China dolls, porcelain dolls, rag dolls, marionettes. Some pristine, their glass eyes gleaming, others cracked, their faces fractured like broken eggshells. A few were missing limbs, their little hands or feet scattered nearby like discarded bones. Each was arranged with purpose, facing outward, as though waiting to be admired. The smell of them filled the room, a mixture of musty cloth, old varnish, and something sharper beneath. It reminded me of dried flowers mixed with spoiled fruit, a sweetness gone sour. I told myself I was only exploring, only curious, but something deeper pulled me further into the house. It was in the back room where I found the case. A tall glass cabinet, its panes smudged and fogged, framed in wood darkened by time. Inside sat a single doll, not one of dozens like in the other rooms, just one. The Collector's Doll. It was larger than the others, nearly the size of a small child. Porcelain, though not the smooth, pale kind. Its face was painted with such detail it looked unsettlingly human. Skin with faint mottling, lips tinted a deep red, cheeks dusted with color that had faded unevenly over time. Its eyes were glass, but wet-looking, shimmering in the dim light as though they held liquid beneath the surface. They seemed to focus, to follow, though I told myself it was only the glass refracting. Its hair was real. Not synthetic fibers, but strands that looked coarse, dull with age, some tangled into knots, others curling like they had once belonged to someone alive. The faint smell of rot seemed to cling to it, a sour note beneath the mustiness. Its dress was yellowed lace, torn at the edges, stained in places with what looked disturbingly like old rust. One of its hands rested in its lap, fingers curled delicately. The other was lifted, palm outward, as though in greeting or warning. The longer I looked at it, the less it seemed like a doll. The cabinet glass bore streaks from the inside, thin trails like condensation, but sticky, hardened. The shelves beneath its porcelain shoes were speckled with faint brown stains. And though the air in the house was still, I could swear its lace skirt trembled faintly, as if stirred by a breath from within. I should have left then, but my hand reached for the cabinet door. The latch was cold, almost wet. When it gave, the hinges groaned with a sound that made the dolls around me seem to lean closer, their silence thickening. The smell that escaped was worse, sour-sweet, like dried blood mixed with rot. Up close, the collector's doll looked even more wrong. Its glass eyes were not flatly reflective like the others, but deep, like windows. When I leaned near, I thought I saw something behind them. Movement, shadows shifting in the liquid dark. And then came the sound. It wasn't loud, soft at first, like the faintest creak of porcelain joints. But it grew, tiny clicks and shifts, as though something inside the doll was adjusting itself. I felt vibrations through the cabinet shelf, a delicate shiver that passed into my fingers. I froze, breath shallow, as its head tilted. Not much, barely a fraction, but enough. Enough to make my throat seize and my stomach twist. Its eyes were on me now, not reflecting me, seeing me. The faint glimmer of liquid within them shifted, catching the light. I thought I heard something else, too, beneath the clicks, something like a whisper, muffled, as though spoken through glass. I stumbled back, but my eyes couldn't leave it. Its lips seemed parted more than before, faint cracks in the paint revealing a darker line within. Its raised hand had changed position slightly, not open now, but fingers curled as though beckoning. The whispers grew clearer, not words I could understand, but syllables wet and broken like someone trying to speak while drowning. I tried to leave. My body turned, but the hallway stretched longer than I remembered, the shadows deeper, the doors different. The dolls on the shelves seemed closer, their glass eyes gleaming faintly, their porcelain faces tilted toward me. I could feel them behind me, all of them, watching as I fled. But the sound followed. The clicking of joints, the muffled whispers, and then faint footsteps, light, uneven, like a child's feet tapping across wooden floors. I refused to look back. But when I finally reached the doorway, when I burst into the pale light of the afternoon, I felt something brush my arm. Small, cold, and delicate, like porcelain fingers. I didn't go back to that house. I thought I had escaped it, that distance would matter. But the smell followed me, faint at first, then stronger. That same sweetness rotting beneath. And at night, When the silence in my home grows thick, I hear it. The clicking, the whispers. Sometimes I see her too, reflected in the glass of a window, in the dark surface of a television screen. Not standing still, not waiting in her cabinet anymore. Always closer than before. Her glass eyes wet, shimmering, filled with things that shift and stir behind them. Her hand is always raised, not in greeting, not in warning, but in claim. And I know one night, when the silence is heavy enough and the smell is strong enough, she won't be on the other side of the glass anymore. She'll be here,